Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Inside the GM Studio, podcast all about the tabletop RPG hobby. I am your host, Matt.
And as always, I am David.
And this week, we wanted to bring up a very touchy subject. What are some other things that you can do?
Yes.
Other occurrences that you could bring up or that you could use instead of final death in role playing games. This is something that I think needs to come up a little bit more because that's the only consequence that people really get behind. I know in a lot of newer games out there with different mechanics, they have different versions, and hell, some of the games they don't even do death anymore. They just do different consequences to use, and they are usually role play. They're made for role play narrative things. So I've got my little list of things here, and I went both where the consequence could strip away player agency, or some that won't, and it's just a little bit more narrative, or it can be even mechanical. But I tried to think of some good things to use other than just a death mechanic. What do you think, David? What did you come up with anything?
Yeah, I came up with a few things, but I think part of the heart of the reason that this topic was something I don't remember if I pitched this topic to you or we just kind of discussed it, and but the reason it was clanging around my head and I thought it was good is that it gets into previous discussions that we've had about how to set the stage for your narrative. And a big part of that is setting stakes. And yes, death, or let's just say the potential for death, right? That is a stake, right? Like every time you enter into a fight or whatever, not necessarily like a consequence because the players don't likely face that all that frequently in the game, but they do frequently face at least the threat of it.
Mm.
And but that's not every situation needs to have life or death stakes. And narratives that vary up the types of things that can happen to a character that are bad, or let's not even say bad, let's just say, less than ideal, like negative in some way. Uh, the more variance you have there, the better. And actually, in my head, when I pitched it to you or when we were talking about it, it reminded me of our discussion about treasure, and how just having like one type, like if you just give your players gold all the time, that's boring. And if you just give your
Mm.
players, like, you need a variety of different things that, like, everything from just kind of like minor little tchotchkes that might be something cool, like, oh wow, he has a pair of rabbit ears in his backpack. That's weird, right? All the way up to, like, super high level magical items and everything between, from potions to gold, and they all serve a certain purpose in your narrative. And so to me, I was like, oh yeah, like that we could have a similar discussion about what narrative stakes do to drive certain elements of your plot.
Mhm.
I would imagine that one of the first things that came to both of our minds, it's kind of, maybe it's not the first thing, but in D&D, a great way to give your players a certain level of threat that isn't necessarily putting them in physical harm's way is to just use whatever exhaustion mechanic you
Mhm.
have. So what this does is it allows the players to realize that there is some toll that's being taken on them, typically physically, uh, that isn't necessarily putting them in direct peril because it's a ladder, right? It's one step on a ladder. So it's like a thing that you need to get taken care of. And the reason that this is good is it's not an immediate threat. It's kind of like a creeping threat. And so when you want to show things that add up over a longer arc, the exhaustion ladder mechanic is pretty good. The D&D's exhaustion mechanic's not super sophisticated, but there are other games that have them, or some games have. I know Matt is a big fan of this, but when there's some cost to using magic,
Mm.
usually it harms you in some way, or it's blood magic. It requires a physical, some investment of your lifeblood, or it
Yes.
just wears your psyche down over a certain time. This is very similar to the exhaustion mechanic. Is that the first thing that came to your mind, Matt?
Actually, it wasn't, but it should have been because now that you bring it up, yes, that's exactly what I would normally think right away.
Yeah, somewhat adjacent to that. I think that lingering injuries are also another really good one,
Mm-hmm.
because what they do is they make, just like the exhaustion mechanic, they give a physical consequence to something, without it needing to be the potential for the player to die. And both of these things do a lot of heavy lifting in your story, because they add an element of kind of grounded, gritty realism. Because frankly, characters don't go from just being healthy to being dead. I mean, they can, but that makes it feel a little more video gamey. If you want your world to feel like it has gravity and consequence, then most of these things are going to be kind of a rising tide, where a character you can either layer them over the top of danger. So a player gets into a fight, maybe certain conditions as warrant, you would award a level of exhaustion, or you would award, a lingering injury or something to that effect. It's pretty good to have it be grounded in some way, that there should be some semblance of failure associated with it, so that it doesn't feel arbitrary. Like, well, I feel like you would have you jumped off this building, and I feel like you would have a lingering injury from landing. It's like, you want it to be like you failed an athletics check, or like in my game, you get a level of exhaustion when you lose consciousness, um, and it just kind of stays with you until you wipe it.
Mm-hmm.
That's quick. It's easy. It's simple. It lets you know that there is some consequence to dropping below 0 hit points. Um, and you could argue that it kind of minimizes that a little bit, because I kind of bolstered the mechanic up a little bit to allow the players to get back in the game a little bit quicker, but that was just for expediency. So those were the first two that came to my mind, but I have a couple more, but I want to let you jump in there with whatever your
Yeah,
first thoughts were.
I want to bring up that last thing that you were bringing up, like jump from a building. You think there would be some sort of lingering injury that you would have if you jumped from 5 stories up. Uh, long time ago, when our group was still together for like the fourth edition group, my buddy Nate Higley, came up with a survival zombie game himself, and I thought it had some good. It was a very stripped down version of a tabletop role playing game, but he wanted it to be gritty and set in realism, to kind of play this survival game. And there was at one point, I was playing in it as he was running it, and me and the other players, we were running across the street, and he had like military people were set up everywhere, and they were taking shots at damn near everybody that was in the streets. And rolled, he was rolling for shots. I got shot. I came up with a little bit of a flavor that, as the bullets were coming in, I lost my, my footing, and I fell flat on my face because I only took like 3 points of damage, and I think our max HP was like around 10 to 15, something like that.
Okay.
And because I thought, oh, we want realism. If I got shot, I'm fucked. I can't
Pretty
run.
much,
I
yeah.
can't do anything. He said I got shot right in the ankle, so I was like, well, I can only stand on one leg then. And because after I said that, I was like, and I fall on my face and blood goes everywhere, and I just go, oh no, fuck. And he's like, oh no, you got shot. I want, that he was talking about how he wanted that feeling. He's just like, I want you to know that you got shot and this sucks. And I was like, well, then if I got shot, then I can't walk very well. I should get, minuses to this, and this. And after I told him all this, he was like, you know what? Your way was better. Let's just do it
Yeah.
that other way. We're not going to do that. Like, yeah,
Yeah, because, if you want to have some semblance of realism, like getting shot is pretty painful and
yeah.
debilitating. It's not like you can, you know,
Depending on the
shrug it off,
caliber,
right?
yeah, depending on the caliber, getting shot in your ankle could take a foot off.
Yeah. And so, and yeah, people do get grazed, from wounds, but if you wanted to have something that's like more like an accumulation of small injuries, um, that kind of wears the PCs down, where it's not like just a lever, whether they're alive or dead. Um, it's a really good way to demonstrate that lingering injuries and exhaustion mechanics. They're consequences that are beyond the threat of death, and you can even use them for things that don't threaten the characters' lives, but should probably be some sort of cost to them. They've
Hmm.
been hiking through the jungle for like the better part of a day, or they're, chasing someone down, or they're, just getting battered up. They're, out in the hot, blistering sun, or, in a snowstorm or something like that. It's like, well, these things would take their toll on you. They're not likely to be like a likely threat to your life, but most things that are like survival based, that's kind of what they're getting at, is that
Hmm.
like the management of an accumulation of small grievances. Like, no one of them is likely to kill you, but if you don't have food, you don't have shelter, you don't have water, you don't have shoes, right? Like, just the most minor things can seem like a big impediment. And if you
Yeah.
were playing a game that you wanted there to be some stakes to something that wasn't a threat to the PC's lives in a direct way, then you could do this, right? You could infuse these things into your exploration mechanic if you wanted them to feel a little more significant, right? Like, the
Hmm.
PCs are traveling through a jungle or a desert or some other sort of inhospitable environment, Arctic tundra, these are inhospitable environments, and instead of just treating it like they're sauntering from one town to another, give it a little more gravity by kind of infusing some of these things in here. Maybe you don't want to have like a bunch of monsters along the path or whatever, but nevertheless, it provides you another option to have there be some gravity to a situation that maybe otherwise wouldn't have had it. And then you
Hmm.
can also layer them over the top of other things that are a threat to the PC's lives. Like I said, you get knocked unconscious, you get a critical hit against you or something. Maybe it does extra things that you have to cope with after the the narrative of the thing that's immediately in your way, uh as the immediate threat is taken care of. Because another thing that it does is it provides more of a sense of resource management and a threat or something for the PCs to be concerned about, that kind
Hmm.
of turns the screws on them and ratchets the temperature up. Because often you're in a fight and it's a life or death fight. If you make it out of the fight, then it's kind of like you breathe a sigh of relief and you're like, oh, now I didn't die, so everything is fine. It's like, but not if you have not if you have exhaustion, not if you have lingering injuries. Those things carry on after, and the management of them is can be quite interesting. It can also
Hmm.
bog your game down quite a bit, so you want to be cautious of that. But yeah,
Okay. So the first one that I had, the first section that I put up on my list here, was because I wanted to think of, if you're not doing death, what is the next thing that really, really fucking sucks? And that would I could think of was permanent or semi-permanent loss. Uh, Things that you take away from the player or the character, technically, like a loss of a limb or even the capability to use the limb.
yeah,
That's a big one that can really fuck them over. It can be cool, but it can really, change the way that a person plays and if they even want to continue to play that character. Um, Destruction of signature gear or even resources.
yeah,
Think of your character might have a legendary weapon, some sort of spell focus, whatever, and you take that away. I mean, a lot of people get butthurt about that sort of shit. I wrote down here burned resource. Burned resources. So, like your max HP goes down.
yeah,
Maybe even lower a stat. Uh, that's what I meant when I said burned resources.
yeah. That was definitely on my list too. The I permanent injury, I mean, I probably would have put that under the umbrella of a lingering injury, right?
Mm,
Like it's probably, but lingering kind of implies that it'll go away at some point. But yeah, just like a character just doesn't have like his right hand anymore or something like
yep.
that. Like that's a pretty severe consequence. Um, and also kind of gives your character a sense of like uh history, which is neat. But yeah, lowering max hit points, lowering stats even just temporarily.
Hmm.
But you have
And
to
then
decide.
yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
last one I have is a pretty easy one. I think I don't know if I put this on here. I should have put it on something else. It's the aging slash corruption. So I got this from oh my god, what was it? There is the demons campaign for fifth edition. Now I can't Into the Abyss. Sorry, that's it. Into the Abyss.
Yeah.
And they had a corruption mechanic in there that I thought was really good. And it made me think that another way to permanently change a character would either be either age. I don't think there's not a lot of things that deal with that anymore. When I think of it, playing back in second edition, there was a lot of shit in there that would change your character's age. And like
Yeah.
age was a big thing back then. And they made it point out like, find out your race's age limits and all this.
Yeah.
And because
Well,
this is going to,
they even used to adjust your stats.
yeah, yeah,
Like when you hit a certain age, your strength and your con go down by one, but your intelligence and wisdom go up,
yeah.
right? And they don't do that as much anymore. The only thing that I'm aware that does it is the ghost's scare power or whatever it is, ages you, and it's largely because a campaign even levels 1 to 20 for D&D is often more of a pressure cooker, which means in game time it's probably only a year or two or three. I mean, it's not going to be so if you're in your prime of your life, right? You're somewhere as a human, you're somewhere between the ages of probably 18, 19, 20, and maybe as old as almost 30, but if you try to think of the analogy to a pro athlete, like 30 something year old pro athlete is kind of past his prime, and so you're elite when you're 24, 25, 26, 27. Like those are your elite years, right? And so
Hmm.
it's probably also true for adventurers. But yeah, I didn't think about age, but I did think of kind of the mental equivalent of the lingering injury, which kind of plays into the whole corruption thing that you were talking about, which is like sanity, right?
Hmm.
Like you can
Yeah.
have some sort of madness that afflicts your character, and you give them um, maybe different personality traits, maybe phobias, maybe some sort of social tick or whatever.
Hmm.
Those are great role playing opportunities too, because you can kind of just give the player that thing. Like you're now afraid of dolphins, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, I guess. And it's like, if they, it's a good opportunity for them to play through something that would be an impediment, but probably feels more like a cool opportunity for the player than it does. Like, you're like fucking my knee's fucked up now, and now I take a hit to my stats,
Yeah.
or whatever. That kind of sucks. Maybe you take a hit. Your ankle is fucked up now permanently, and so now your max speed is reduced by 5 feet, right? Like, it's kind of crummy. Not a big deal,
Yeah.
but if you just tell them like, oh no, now you're afraid of rats or whatever, so when you see rats, you're just gonna have to roll for fear or whatever. But they're
Yeah.
likely just to role play it out, and that's more fun, I think.
Hmm. That goes with my number three spot here was my transformation
Mm.
slot. So instead of death, transformations can work out pretty good. I know I'm skipping number two, but this goes well with what David was just saying. One that I've never dealt with, and I've always wanted to try, instead of death, maybe cursed into another form of some sort. Like they
Ooh.
take their soul, their essence, and it gets placed into a monster, a construct, something like that. Just a curse of some sort that is almost as bad as death, or it can be a lot cooler than death actually is. It can suck a lot more, but it could also be way cooler.
Yeah, I didn't
Uh,
think about that. Like some sort of geese or curse
yep,
or
yeah.
yeah.
Um, alignment, ideology shift. From Trauma, this is just something that I thought of coming from my character in the Curse of Strahd campaign, or not the Curse of Strahd campaign, the last one though, where he lost his best friend Tom,
Yeah.
and Trauma kind of rewrote him for a little while. So
Yeah.
I thought maybe that change. And then memory loss or rewritten past. I was thinking that could be something as well. Something else that I've never tried like in the middle of a campaign. It's always started like my character has amnesia from this time to this time.
Yeah.
And just like, okay, yeah, cool, fun, yay. Getting your memories back throughout the campaign, that's fun. But what happens when you lose them halfway through because of a fight? You fell, you quote unquote died, but when you were brought back, you lost the last 5 years of your life. What does that change?
Yeah, I mean, that is a little tropey or whatever, but
Hmm.
it also makes it difficult for the player to role play out. I'm a more because you like having selective memory is kind of like okay, well, but like in that time I learned to use a sword, so does that just mean I don't know how to use a sword anymore?
Yeah.
Like it raises some interesting questions. But there's some things too, like I mentioned kind of a speed reduction for a lingering injury, but there can also be you since you were talking about curses and stuff there you can also consequence players or have a grading if that's not death or something that might fall under the umbrella of a injury or a curse that maybe prevents them from like speaking or something like
Ooh,
or
yeah.
they can't speak under certain conditions. Um I remember like long ago when I was in like middle school, like when I first started playing D&D, there was these kids and they also played D&D. And I got hip to the fact that they were playing D&D because they were carrying D&D books around school and they were talking about it. And so I was kind of talking to them and asking them kind of like what their game is like and all this stuff. Um, and one of the kids said that he's like, "Oh, my character," like he was describing his character and he was like it was kind of a neat curse where it was like when my character gets scared, he turns into a cat. It was like some curse like a witch put on him. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's kind of neat. I don't know how you would like that seems like it could be pure role playing, but it could also just be you could bake in some sort of mechanic that's like say anytime the character might have to roll a save against fear, right? Like if he would be subject to the frightened condition, maybe he just goes mute for the next 24 hours or
Yeah.
maybe he does he turns into a cat or something like like it just until like the condition passes. Those things would be kind of neat and fun and quirky. I would say just make sure you're not overusing stuff like that or it just gets kind of zany and really bizarre.
Hmm.
A little goes a long way for consequences like that. um what was your number one, Matt? I didn't did we pass by it
Oh,
already?
well, yeah, we got my number two, actually. My
Oh,
number two section uh, jumped over this, which is the loss of agency section, temporarily or situationally, depending on what you want to do with them. These were more of just like thoughts that I had that you could use. I don't know how devastating they could be, uh, because the first one is one that we've all done. At least us that have been running games, especially medieval fantasy games for over the 20-year mark, captured or imprisoned. Instead of final death, they've been captured or imprisoned. Uh, every person that I've ever played under has done one of these at least once.
yeah,
Uh, we're,
it's almost the go-to bullshit thing that your DM will do if he's too much of a coward to kill you.
well, yeah, instead of
He
a
knocks you
TPK,
unconscious and he takes you captive. It's like, but
yeah,
why? Why would he do that?
yeah. Especially when it's like a beast, like you're facing off against a displacer beast. Sure, they're smart, but there's still this beast that is just like I
Yeah.
could just kill you.
He's
I'm
not
gonna
gonna
kill you
clunk
and
you
eat
over the
you.
head and drag you back to his lair. It's like
Yeah,
he's gonna eat your brain, right?
I'm
Like,
going to interrogate you later.
yeah.
No, no, you aren't. You're going to kill me.
Yeah.
Um, blackmailed into working against their goals or blackmailed to work against their party uh, can be very, very interesting. Bound to a new oath or contract, I thought could be cool. Um, like maybe the if it is like a paladin, or even it could work with anybody. So like, monk, paladin. Usually, if they're like a martial class, uh, they get bound by a new oath of some sort,
Yeah.
or even a contract. Not to say just like a warlock contract or anything, but a contract to use against them and against probably people that are close to them. And then I thought comes from more like the cyberpunk games that I ran, addiction or dependencies. It could be magic dependency, substance, an entity of some sort. Uh, but after being defeated, usually you come back with some sort of PTSD of some sort, and who knows, maybe you just end up becoming an alcoholic, or maybe you just become, you got to go get hookers every night.
Yeah.
That could be your thing now.
It's yeah, yeah. I hadn't really thought of that because I wasn't thinking in terms of uh, cyberpunk, mostly just kind of medieval fantasy.
Mm.
But you touched on a couple of things that yeah had occurred to me. Um, One of which is that to damage the character's reputation, I think
Hmm.
that characters' reputations are probably the most valuable thing that they have. And so if you can figure out a way to have that be a consequence, like this, it's like if you ruin it enough, malign it enough, then that could conceivably even be like a fate worse than death if they're like renowned heroes. I like games that have mechanics where your reputation kind of contributes to how you interact with people.
Agreed.
Just like you kind of already alluded to, you can also have some consequences for characters that get their powers from other sources other than martial or arcane. So, like the pact magic or
Hmm.
like bargains with the deity that give you your divine favor, you can consequence players by making those things dry up. We had this in Curse of Strahd where it was like one of the characters was a warlock, and he had been kind of getting little side quests from his patron, who was Orcus, I want to say.
Hmm.
He was giving him these side quests, and you know, levels one, two, three, that was like, okay, it wasn't that big of a deal. They're kind of like minor things. Maybe they're not good, but they're not really at odds with the party. Then there was a couple that were like, they were creating tension with the party. And then it kind of came to a culmination where it was like, no, this item that the party very much needs, like Beto's patron wants it. And so it was really like, you either have to deliver on this to your patron, and I made it clear like there are going to be consequences um, to that, or you're going to deliver for the party and kind of show solidarity. And he chose the party, so I was just like, okay, yeah, your bond now with your patron is gone. Like you cannot gain mortal levels in Warlock until you get a new patron. Also, uh, since basically your patron owns your soul, if you die, you're dead, right? You're not coming back to life because your
Hmm.
soul is not willing to re-enter your body. So that's a thing. And then he also lost his spellcasting focus and his familiar.
Yep. Since he was packed of the chain, he lost the familiar.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was like, those things seem like a fairly good consequence. And they were kind of a drag, but they weren't like, they didn't cause the game to screech to a halt. It was just like he couldn't level. He
Hmm.
couldn't gain any experience until he got basically multi-classed into a new class or until he found another patron to begin his warlocking again. So stuff like that is pretty neat, but it's kind of similar to the idea of similar to the idea of reputation, but it's just with a otherworldly patron, or like perhaps with a deity for a paladin or a cleric, where maybe you take certain abilities away from a
Hmm.
player, let them know that their deity is displeased in some way, perhaps limit some of their powers until they're back in good standing. Um, that's things like that are good because they're unique to the player often, unless you have a whole party full of just paladins and clerics or whatever that all worship the same deity, which would be bizarre, but could conceivably be the case. Uh, or patrons, similar things. So, but yeah, I really like the idea of like damaging players' reputations because it shows that their actions have consequences, and if you strip a player of all of their weapons and all of their spells and whatever, like if they're a heroic character, they can and will make their way in the world again. They will build
Hmm.
themselves back up. Um, but if you just disgrace them in some way, that's a little bit harder to come back from, and is much more difficult for them to rebuild. You take away a sword, they can just go get a sword, right? Like it's not a big deal, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I got some design advice that I was jotting down while thinking of all these, and these were just kind of like the telegraphs almost of when I was thinking of, let's see, instead of death, what can you do? So the big one that I thought of was immediately telegraph the stakes early,
Hmm.
because if the players don't know what, if they, not that they don't know, but if they don't understand what they're risking, the end result can skew to the point where they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like if that's why like death is supposed to be like the big one, because this character is just gone now. There's no raised
Well,
dead in this
and it's
game.
and it's death is a simple and easily understood stake, so it
Yeah.
doesn't really require much understanding. Like you like go up against a big bad guy, like okay, we know that the stakes are death, right?
Yeah.
And that's I thought that the thing with the patron, like for Beto, was kind of like almost beyond even death. It's like this he didn't
Hmm.
die, but the stakes was like his soul was literally at stake.
Yeah.
So it's like the potential to even like once you're dead, that your soul is not like free. It's like owned by this evil demon lord, right? That might require a little bit of role playing to, make the gravity of that evident. But other stakes need to kind of, like you said, be telegraphed a little more.
Hmm. I think that's might be where I got this next part in, because I just wrote down tie consequences to player choices. Because like arbitrary punishments are just cheap and boring.
Yes.
So I would rather them be kind of wrapped up in the from the player's choice, like with the thing that you did with Beto with the warlock. Oh, you
Mhm.
betrayed your patron. Guess what, dude? This is what's going to happen.
To be fair though, I don't I agree with you, but I don't mean to say like arbitrary consequences, yes, but that's not to say you can't surprise your players with something
Oh, sure.
every now and again, but it needs to have an internal consistency, even if the players don't see how it got to be this way. Like sometimes a random event happening, a random, I don't know, boulder falls off a cliff or something. Like if the random boulder falls off a cliff because the players are exploring an area you don't want them to explore and it falls on someone and crushes them, that's not cool.
Mm.
But if they had up on the hill earlier, they had a fight with a hill giant, and when he missed a couple of the PCs, he slammed into the foundation of the ledge of the rock or whatever, and then the PCs later travel down there, and then a boulder falls on top of them. It's like, well, then there's a logical consistency to it, right?
Hmm.
Like it might be abrupt and it might be shocking, but it's like you go like, oh yeah, right. Of course, right? Like, and how many moments have we had like that in games over the years where it's like, yeah, of course, like, of course that happened. Like, oh right, I forgot. I had a torch in my hand. Like,
Yeah.
whoops. Like, it's like, yep. Uh, so yeah, I just wanted to say that like it doesn't mean you can't like shock or surprise your players,
Oh, for sure.
but you're absolutely right. Like there needs to be some consistency that's not just punitive, random shit.
Yeah. These next two, I separated them because I felt like they should be separated, but they can go together quite well. Let consequences create new gameplay. Don't just subtract shit from your players or their characters. Try to transform them into a new way to play. Uh, like with David's thing with the if you go under the fear mechanic, maybe you have to roll versus fear, and if you fail, you turn into a cat. That's just fun gameplay, really.
Yeah.
Because now maybe you actually have the stat block of a cat, but you're much like a druid, your
Yeah.
intelligence is the same and all that. That could be fun. And then mixing that with short-term pain with long-term arcs is kind of the idea that I had. The immediate hit of consequence that could lead to a whole nother arc for your campaign.
Yep. Well, you're
Future
just
implications of it.
yeah, yeah. So like yeah, like one of the things that you said is that's important. And maybe it seems like you were talking about telegraphing what the likely consequences of a certain gradient of action
Yes.
is. But I also think it's important to communicate to the players the permanence of such things, right? Like you sometimes you can just mechanically say, all right, like, or it's baked into the mechanic where you say, okay, you suffer a level of exhaustion, right? And you go, okay, you baked into the mechanic of exhaustion is when you take a short rest, it clears all levels of exhaustion. And so, okay, that's just baked in. But if it's not, if there's some other thing, like you have some weird curse on you, you need to give the players some understanding of how permanent that is. Is
Yeah.
this a thing that you have to go track down the witch that cursed you and like do a favor for her, and then if she agree that then the curse is lifted, or is it like on the blood moon, the midnight on the night of the blood moon, if you sacrifice a deer, or something, right? Or for like a month, right? Or until X thing happens, right?
Yeah. Like
Sometimes
a
it's fun.
god damn it, what was that? That was one of our early 5e games. I remember somebody got some sort of effect on them. It was a curse of some sort, and we found out that you needed a greater restoration spell.
Yeah,
And we were all level 3, and greater restoration is just nothing that we could get for a while.
yeah,
So they're like, we need to find somebody that knows this spell. And our weeks go by, and we finally find somebody. We don't find them, but we find their name. Just like we get told who it is. We're like, all right, we got to go find this person. Right before we get there, TPK. That should just tell you that's how David's games go. That's what happens.
that was our original Curse of Strahd game,
It
I
might
think.
have been, yeah.
Yeah, because I think you were going out to Kretsk and the abbot there.
That's it. Yep, that is it.
And then you were like, "Yay, we found him!" You're dead. You're all
Yeah.
dead. Fuck you. Um, so yeah, that was yeah. But you need to give the players like some idea of like, okay, you lost your arm. Okay, like that's just a thing you deal with now, right? Like
Hmm.
you don't have an arm anymore. That's permanent. Um, or some gradient, some conditions that would alleviate it. Uh, if you're gonna have something, you need to have that severity calibrated to what it is you're trying to achieve, right? Like things that are cleared after a short rest are pretty easy to cope with. Things after a long rest, depending on how action packed your campaign is, might be a little more of an impediment. Um, it's the reason we got rid of some of our lingering injuries because it was like starting to realize that it like some of them take like weeks to heal unless you have a
Hmm.
greater restoration spell, and it's like, okay, so I didn't want that. It just bogs the game down. Um, so yeah, try to give your players enough understanding from the outset, not only if you do X, Y is likely the consequence, but once Y is the consequence, how permanent is it? And what would you need to do to your point about kind of tying things to players' choices. So sometimes a player might choose to do something because maybe it's heroic, maybe they're being self-sacrificing, maybe it's not a blunder, right? Maybe they're actively going like, I know what the cost of this is, and it's going to be kind of pain in the ass for me, but I'm doing it to have a heroic moment, to kill the big bad, to save the princess, to allow my allies an opportunity to escape. And so they bear that cost, and then they have to kind of work to like heal from it or
Hmm.
to make it right. And that has more narrative thrust than some other options.
My last section here that I had was my narrative fallout. I had some other ideas, but these are like the four big ones that I thought of. So with narrative fallout, the consequences more reshape the world than does the character itself.
Hmm.
At least to me, when I think of narrative fallout, it does. Like a town falls because the party failed, so they lose a town. Uh, an enemy gains a major advantage. Now, this can be an item, an artifact, territory, political power. They gain some sort of advantage for the next time that they meet. It's going to be a lot harder. Reputation collapse. This is one that David brought up earlier. This is one I'm a big fan of as well. They become wanted. They're exiled from the region. Their honor score goes down.
Yeah,
Their street cred takes a hit. I
exactly.
love that shit. That
Me too.
little number that a lot of people take, for granted, but that little number there can really mean a big deal in the game if you want it to.
Yeah.
I remember in Hackmaster when we first started playing Hackmaster, David saw the honor score and he was like, "That's fucking badass. They all need that."
Yeah, it's good. I think that there's the Mongoose Publishing Conan Roll 20 that's like it's a big part of the mechanic. I don't care for that system writ
Yeah.
large, but it's like you build, I think they call it reputation, or it might be honor or prestige or something like that.
Hmm.
But it's all the same. It's just like you have it's like your level plus a few other things. And it basically is just like, look, the most valuable thing you have is your reputation. And
Hmm.
if people revere you, they fear you and they'll respect you. And your social encounters with them go a lot better if they know who you are. And so it's like every time you introduce yourself to someone, I am Matt of the Vale, right? And then you roll a score, and like you have a score, and if you roll under that score, then the person has heard of you. Like, oh, the same man of the Vale that fucked that guy up in the bar and busted his chops with a. You're like the same motherfucker, right? And you would pick stuff that each adventure, like the thing that you want to be known from this adventure to increase your reputation. Um, I thought that was a really awesome mechanic, and I
Yeah.
wish D&D had something that was even remotely like
That's
that.
one thing I love. Like a lot of cyberpunk games have, some sort of street cred score.
Hmm.
And like Shadowrun was the first one I ever noticed that had both heat and street cred.
Hmm.
Street cred's with the criminals, heat is what you got against the law enforcement.
Hmm.
Your heat score, that's your stars. If you guys play Grand Theft Auto, that's how many
Yeah, I was gonna
stars you
say,
got.
yeah, it was my thoughts exactly.
But I fucking love that. It's like something that doesn't come up often, but it's a big part of the game, those numbers.
Yeah, yeah, I think what you're talking about, kind of narrative consequences, to me, they almost fall under the umbrella of kind of like something you might call a plot twist,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
or the plot thickens, right? You the big bad beats you up and he gets away, and maybe he doesn't kill you. Death is not on the table. Um, but now it's like, well, now he's got runway, and now he kind of
Yeah.
knows your plans, and it's like that. This takes the plot in a different direction,
Yeah.
right?
The whole point of it is for the player to feel responsible for their failure, but they're
Yeah,
not getting their character taken away from them.
exactly. Yeah, and saddling people with lots of consequences of failure is either a way is that real OSR way of challenging and throwing down the gauntlet to have your players rise to the
Mm.
occasion. This is why OSR gamers, they think that like modern gamers are just so soft because if you're used to narrative games and your GM is just saddling you with all these consequences, you're just going to buckle under that pressure and you're just going to be like, this isn't fun anymore. You're just beating the shit out of me and torturing me, right? So the OSR gamer goes like, you throw down the gauntlet and it's like they're kind of into crunchy rule sets and stuff, and they go like, okay, yeah, like bring it on, man, right? Like I got some shit. Like you want to throw misery at me? Like I am heroic. I will climb to the top of the mountain and I will be victorious, right? Like this is the
Mhm.
OSR gamer's mindset. Um, so you got to calibrate that based on the kind of players you got.
All right. Well, that's all I got. You got anything here to end on, David?
I think we touched just about all the major pillar things that it seems like we're on the same page for a lot of this stuff. So
Yeah. All right. Well, then, for all of you out there that is listening, tell us what you think. What do you do? Do you have a death mechanic at all? Do you play one of those games that doesn't have a death mechanic? Or maybe it doesn't have a death mechanic, but you said, fuck that shit. We're going to put it in anyway. You fuck around, you're going to find out your character's going to die. I'm going to tear up your shit, throw it away, make something new. Or what are some other ideas that you have out there? Instead of death, what do you do? Let us know. Send it to insidethegmstudio@gmail.com and let us know. Or email us and give us a topic to talk about sometime later, perhaps. I love good topics. I love to talk about topics. I love it when you guys send in topics, emails for us to talk about. Gives us so much shit to talk about. It's real nice. Yeah, just give us that. Or tell us that we're doing great, too. That's always good. But either way, for this week, for Inside the GM Studio, I have been your host, Matt.
and I'm David.
A good night.